The Tyrannids don't invade worlds. They digest them. Every organism, every ocean, every blade of grass gets broken down and fed back into a galaxy-spanning biological war machine that has already consumed everything outside our galaxy. Today I'm breaking down the most terrifying species in the Tyrannid swarm, what makes each one a nightmare, and why the scariest ones aren't always the biggest, starting with the one nobody takes seriously, Ripper swarms. Let's get this out of the way. Rippers are pathetic. A 6+ armor save, strength 3, and they take double wounds from template weapons. A single guardsman with a flamer could wipe an entire base of them without breaking a sweat. They are, by every measurable stat, the weakest bioform the hive mind has ever produced. But here's the thing, they're not designed to fight you, they're designed to eat you. Every dead soldier, every destroyed vehicle, every fallen Tyrannid organism, every tree and rock and puddle of standing water on a conquered world gets consumed by Ripper swarms and funneled directly back into the hive mind's biomass reserves. They're not warriors, they're a biological recycling plant with legs, and that's the real horror. Not that Rippers can kill you, because honestly, they probably can't. The horror is what they represent. Once the battle is over and the Rippers have finished their work, there is literally nothing left. No ruins, no bones, no evidence that your civilization ever existed. The planet is just a bare rock drifting through space. That cold industrial efficiency is the foundation everything else in this video builds on. The Tyrannids don't conquer, they erase. And Rippers are the proof. But if you think the cleanup crew is unsettling, wait until you meet the ones actually built for the front lines. Termagants and hormagaunts. Nobody respects these things. They're the first Tyrannid models a new player glues together, the first thing an opponent sees across the table, and the first thing they mentally dismiss. Toughness 3 on both profiles. A stiff breeze kills them. A bolter round turns them into paste without breaking a sweat. But here's where it gets interesting, because these two bioforms are not the same unit wearing different hats. Termagants carry 12-inch strength 4 ranged weapons, which means they can sit on an objective, contribute meaningful firepower, and force your opponent to actually deal with them instead of ignoring a blob of melee bodies standing in the open. They're gunline holders. They park, they shoot, they score. Hormagaunts do the opposite. They trade every bit of ranged utility for an extra melee attack, and critically, 8 inches of movement compared to the Termagant's 6. That 2-inch gap sounds tiny on paper, but in a game where first turn objective pressure can determine the entire match, those 2 inches mean Hormagaunts are already contesting midboard while Termagants are still shuffling forward. Two nearly identical bodies, two completely different battlefield roles. And players will argue about which one is better until the heat death of the universe. But none of that matters at the individual level. The real terror isn't one gaunt, it's 60 of them. It's 90 of them. It's watching your carefully constructed battle plan dissolve because the hive mind doesn't need quality when it has volume that never ever stops coming. And if a mindless swarm of expendable bodies is this effective, imagine what happens when the Tyrannids send something with actual intelligence and killing power. Something like a Genestealer. Genestealers. Every Tyrannid we've talked about so far arrives with the swarm. Genestealers don't. They walk through your front door, shake your hand, and start a family. And that family is the weapon. Here's where it gets dark. A Genestealer infects its host through a parasitic kiss, a direct implantation of Tyrannid genetic material into the victim's body. That victim doesn't die. They go home, they have children, and those children carry the alien genome inside them. First generation hybrids are monstrous, barely passable as anything human. But the hive mind is patient. Second generation, slightly more human. Third, closer still. By the fourth generation, the hybrids have human-like hands, human-like faces, enough social camouflage to hold jobs, join the military, run for local office. They blend in perfectly. But here's the part that should terrify you. This isn't a decade-long operation. Genestealer cults have operated undetected for centuries on some worlds, and quietly breeding, quietly spreading, quietly worshipping a patriarch they believe is a god. The fifth generation completes the cycle, producing a pure strain Genestealer carrying the original genome, and the whole process starts again. Then comes the day of ascension. The cult rises. Planetary defense forces find out that their soldiers, their officers, their governors have been compromised for generations. There's a lore debate about whether Genestealers are even truly Tyrannid, since they can operate completely independent of the hive mind through their own brood telepathy. But that independence is exactly what makes them so effective. You don't fight a Genestealer invasion. You discover you lost one before your grandparents were born. And if the idea of an enemy hiding in plain sight unsettles you, wait until you meet the thing that hides where nobody can see it at all. Lictors infiltrate across generations. Lictors infiltrate across hours. And the thing they're hunting isn't biomass or territory. It's you. Specifically you, the commander, the leader, the one giving orders. A Lictor deploys 9 inches from enemy models. Not 12, not the safe buffer zone everything else in the game respects. 9 inches. That's close enough to smell. His claws strike at strength 7 with AP -2, a profile built from the ground up for one purpose: killing characters. not clearing hordes, not punching vehicles, murdering the people in charge. But here's where it gets genuinely unsettling. The hive mind looked at the standard lictor and decided it wasn't scary enough, so it created the deathleaper, a rare advanced strain that doesn't just assassinate, it terrorizes. The deathleaper arrives before the hive fleet does. While the main swarm is still light years away, this thing is already on the ground, stalking through the shadows of a world that doesn't know it's been marked for consumption. It systematically eliminates military leadership, political figures, anyone holding the chain of command together. Therefore, by the time the first warrior organism makes landfall, the defenders are already broken. Not physically, psychologically. Their leaders are dead, their communications are compromised, and nobody knows what's picking them off. And the game rewards this behavior mechanically. Feeder tendrils generate command points every time a lictor destroys a character unit. Assassination isn't just the mission, it's a resource engine. Every dead commander fuels the swarm's battlefield-wide advantages, turning targeted kills into strategic momentum. It's a thriller movie villain with claws that can punch through power armor. But if a lone predator is terrifying, wait until you see what happens when the hive mind builds something that can lead an entire army. Tyrannid warriors. Every army needs officers. The hive mind's solution was to grow them. Tyrannid warriors are the connective tissue of every invasion force. Purpose-built organisms that sit right in the middle of the Tyrannid command chain. They're smart enough to coordinate hundreds of lesser bioforms across a battlefield, adaptable enough to be armed for literally any combat role, and just intelligent enough to be useful without ever being intelligent enough to question a single order. That last part is the key because the hive mind didn't design middle management. It designed biological radio towers with claws. But here's the part that makes warriors genuinely critical. Their most important function isn't killing things. It's the synapse relay. Hive tyrants issue commands from the top of the psychic hierarchy, but those commands don't just magically reach every hormagaunt and ripper on the ground. Warriors act as living signal boosters, catching those psychic orders and broadcasting them down to the lesser organisms around them. Without that relay chain, the entire swarm loses coherence. Gaunts stop following orders. Rippers go feral. Coordinated invasion forces collapse into mindless animals bumping into walls. Therefore, killing a warrior squad doesn't just remove a few models from the field. It rips a hole in the hive mind's nervous system. And here's where it gets even more unsettling. No two warrior broods need to fill the same role. Their bioweapon symbiotes are completely interchangeable. One squad carries Devourers for range suppression. Another carries Bonezords and Lash Whips for close combat. A third carries Venom Cannons for anti-armor. They're the Swiss Army knife holding the entire operational structure together, and losing them is like cutting the spinal cord of a god-sized organism. But if warriors are the hive mind signal towers, wait until you hear about the creatures that turn psychic power itself into heavy artillery. Zoanthropes and neurothropes. The Eldari have spent millions of years cultivating their psychic abilities. They built entire civilizations around their connection to the warp, develop disciplines that make human psychers look like children playing with matches, and guard their genetic legacy with a ferocity that borders on religious fanaticism. The hive mind looked at all of that and said, thanks, I'll take it. Zoanthropes are built from stolen Eldari DNA, not inspired by it, not loosely adapted from it. The hive mind consumed Eldari biomass, reverse engineered their psychic genome, and constructed purpose-built organisms that channel warp energy with terrifying efficiency. These things don't walk, don't crawl, don't slither, they float. Every zoanthrope moves exclusively through psychic levitation, hovering above the battlefield like a bloated, pulsing brain with a tail, because that's essentially what they are. But here's where it gets genuinely scary. Their warp blast attacks hit hard enough to kill Space Marines outright. A single zoanthrope is dangerous. A brood of 4 or more can manifest 2 psychic powers per turn, which puts their raw psyker output on par with Craftworld and Eldari Seers, who trained for centuries to reach that level. The Tyrannids just grew theirs in a vat. The problem is burnout. Sustained psychic output fries these organisms from the inside out, and a dead zoanthrope is a gap in your psychic artillery line. That's where neurothropes come in. These upgraded variants don't just blast enemies, they leech life force from their kills and funnel that energy back into healing adjacent zoanthropes. It's not a bonus, it's the failsafe. Without the neurothropes cycling energy back into the brood, the entire psychic battery collapses under its own power output. The Eldari perfected psychic warfare over millennia. The hive mind plagiarized their homework and made it expendable. But if stolen psychic power is unsettling, wait until you see what the Tyrannids can do with pure, unthinking physical force. Carnifexes. Standard Carnifex is already one of the most devastating assault organisms the hive mind has ever produced. Towering walls of chitin and muscle designed to smash through fortified positions, crush vehicles under their claws, and absorb punishment that would kill anything else 10 times over. Their biological battering rams and entire Imperial defensive lines have crumbled the moment one of these things things comes charging through the smoke. But here's where it gets terrifying, because there's one Carnifex that broke the rules. Old One-Eye has been killed over a dozen times. Confirmed kills, documented by Imperial forces, verified and filed away. And every single time it came back. Not through some hive mind resurrection trick. Not because the Tyrannids grew a replacement. The same organism reknitting mortal wounds that would permanently destroy any other living thing in the galaxy. Injuries that should have ended it forever simply closed up, healed over, and left nothing but scars. And those scars are the worst part. Every mark on Old One-Eye's body is a record, a historical document written in flesh, cataloging every attempt to stop something that refuses to stay dead. Imperial commanders who've encountered it before don't treat its return as a tactical problem. They treat it as a psychological one, because how do you plan for an enemy you've already killed? During the Hive Fleet Behemoth assault on the Ultramarines world of Calth, Old One-Eye personally spearheaded the offensive. Lehman Russ battle tanks, the backbone of Imperial armored warfare, were swatted aside like debris. Main battle tanks reduced to obstacles in its path. The community has been theory crafting about this creature's continued existence for years. How does a single organism persist across centuries of warfare without the hive mind simply absorbing and recycling it? Whatever Old One-Eye is, it's something the Tyrannids decided was too valuable to ever let die. But at least Old One-Eye announces itself. The next creatures on this list don't give you that courtesy because they attack from underneath. Mawlocs and trygons. Every defense humanity has ever built assumes one thing: the enemy is coming from the horizon. Walls, trenches, minefields, gun emplacements, all of it faces outward. The hive mind looked at that assumption and decided to make it irrelevant by sending the attack straight up through the floor. Trygons are massive serpentine creatures that burrow beneath battlefields and surface directly inside defensive perimeters. They don't charge through your lines. They materialize behind them. With a 10-inch movement profile and the ability to deep strike within 3 inches of where they emerge, a Trygon doesn't give you time to reposition. It's already there, already swinging strength 8 attacks at AP-2, wounding medium vehicles on 4s. But Mawlocs are somehow worse. Their Terror of the Deep ability lets them deploy from just 1 inch away from the table edge, which makes the entire concept of a defensive perimeter geometrically meaningless. You can't set up a screen against something that ignores the math your screen was built on. Every unit you place to block deep strikes, the Mawloc doesn't care. It surfaces wherever it wants, and everything within range takes the hit. Here's where it gets truly terrifying though. One creature bursting through the ground is a crisis, but both Mawlocs and Trygons leave tunnel markers behind when they surface, and those markers don't just sit there looking ominous. They create transit corridors. Additional Tyrannid units can use those tunnels to deep strike in subsequent turns, turning a single breach point into a highway for reinforcements. Think about what that means tactically. You're not dealing with one monster that punched through your floor. You're dealing with a permanent hole in your defense that keeps vomiting out more creatures every turn. It's the same primal horror and as the Alien franchise. Something got into the walls and now it's everywhere. Fortifications are a human answer to human problems. Mawlocs and Trygons are the hive mind's reminder that the ground beneath your feet was never safe. But at least these things announce themselves when they surface. The next creature on our list doesn't even give you that courtesy. Haruspexes. The Haruspex doesn't just kill things, it feeds on killing things, and then it kills more things because it fed. That sentence sounds redundant, but it's literally how this creature works on the tabletop, and it's one of the most disgusting combat loops in the entire Tyrannid Codex. Let's break down the math, because the math is where the horror lives. The shoveling claws hit at strength 14, AP-3, damage D6. That alone is enough to make Imperial Knights nervous, but the shoveling claws aren't even the main event. The Ravenous Maw is. Instead of generating 1 hit roll per attack, the Maw generates D3. So you're already rolling more dice than your opponent expects. But here's where it gets genuinely absurd. Every single model killed by the Ravenous Maw automatically triggers a free shoveling claw attack, not a bonus next turn, not a strategic reserve. Right now, in the same fight phase, another full strength 14 swing. And if that free attack kills something, another free attack. The chain keeps going. Theoretically, this cascade can produce up to 24 attacks in a single fight phase. 24. Each kill feeds the next attack, which feeds the next kill, which feeds the next attack. The creature literally gets more dangerous the more things it destroys. Throw it into a squad of elite infantry and the Haruspex doesn't slow down as it chews through them. It speeds up, but it gets worse. Every model devoured by the Maw heals 1 wound on the Haruspex. So the longer the fight goes, the harder it becomes to actually bring this thing down. It's regenerating mid-combat, fueled entirely by the bodies of whatever it's eating, and the obvious counterplay, just overwhelming it with attacks from every direction, doesn't work either. The Haruspex has acid blood. Anything that successfully wounds it takes mortal wounds in return. You hit it and it bleeds on you, and that blood melts through armor. So you can't outfight it because it kills faster the more you commit. and you can't chip it down safely because it punishes you for every wound you land. It's a creature with zero counterplay, except don't be near it. And for a melee-focused bioform designed to charge directly into enemy lines, that's not really an option. If you think a self-sustaining kill engine is terrifying, wait until you meet the thing commanding it. Hive tyrants. The Swarm Lord cannot be killed. Not permanently. You can destroy its body, burn it, vaporize it, celebrate the victory, and it won't matter, because the hive mind will simply grow another one. But here's the part that should genuinely terrify you. Every single memory, every battle tactic, every failed strategy and successful counter, all of it carries over. The Swarm Lord doesn't come back as a blank slate. It comes back as an updated version of itself, with better answers to whatever killed it last time. Think about what that actually means. This isn't resurrection in some dramatic, heroic sense. It's data retention. The Swarm Lord dies, the hive mind logs what went wrong, and the next iteration walks onto the battlefield, already knowing how you fight, how you think, and exactly how you tried to win last time. You're not fighting a powerful creature. You're fighting an organism that your previous victories have only made smarter, and the results speak for themselves. When the Swarm Lord led Hive Fleet Leviathan into the Holder sector, it achieved complete planetary conquest within 4 months. 4 months from initial contact to total consumption, wielding 4 serrated bone sabers as the single most powerful synapse creature the hive mind has ever produced. That's not a general leading an army. That's a biological supercomputer with millions of years of accumulated combat experience piloting a murder machine. But here's where it gets even worse. The Swarm Lord doesn't belong to any single hive fleet. It appears across multiple invasion forces, wherever the hive mind determines it's needed most. Leviathan today, somewhere else tomorrow. The Gestalt consciousness of the hive mind can project this singular ancient intelligence into whatever theater of war demands a supreme commander. It's not assigned to a fleet like an officer. It's deployed like a weapon, a strategic resource the hive mind aims at whatever problem refuses to die. Every commander who's ever beaten it has only contributed to the training data for the next version, and the next version is always worse for you. But if the Swarm Lord is the hive mind's greatest general, wait until you see what happens when it builds something designed to hunt you personally. Norn emissaries. Every bioform we've covered so far exists because the hive mind has a general playbook. Swarm the ground, dissolve the tanks, eat the psychers, repeat. But what happens when the playbook doesn't work? What happens when the hive mind hits a fortress it can't crack, a commander it can't outmaneuver, or a target so valuable and so well protected that nothing in the existing arsenal can reach it? It builds something new, from scratch, in a single generation. That's what a Norn emissary is. Standing 6.1 meters tall, taller than even a standard hive tyrant, these things aren't mass-produced. They're not pulled from some existing template and tweaked. They are custom engineered by the Norn Queen herself, each one designed for a specific strategic objective. Usually that objective involves infiltrating heavily defended strongholds and abducting high-value, knowledgeable prey, generals, psychers, anyone whose brain contains information that the hive mind wants. But here's where the scale of what they can do gets genuinely frightening. Norn emissaries can kill Adeptus Custodes in a single strike. Let that register for a second. Custodes aren't space marines. They're the Emperor's personal guard, each one a masterwork of genetic engineering and decades of combat training, individually among the deadliest warriors humanity has ever produced. And a Norn emissary puts them down in one hit. That's not a fight. That's a statement. Their psychic capabilities are somehow even more alarming. A single Norn emissary can project shadow in the warp at interplanetary range, disrupting psychic communication across entire star systems. That's not a tactical ability. That's a strategic weapon. One organism cutting off astropathic signals for billions of people across multiple worlds. But the truly terrifying part isn't the size, the strength, or even the psychic reach. It's what Norn emissaries imply about how the hive mind thinks. This is an intelligence that encountered a problem, analyzed it, and then designed a bespoke biological solution specifically for that problem, all within a single reproductive cycle. The enemy you're fighting doesn't just adapt over millennia, it has a living research and development pipeline running in real time. Every defeat you hand it is just data for the next prototype. And somehow, a Norn emissary still isn't the biggest thing the hive mind has ever built. Not even close. Hierophant biotitans, 13.5 meters tall, 51 tons of chitin, muscle, and malice. The Hierophant biotitan is what the hive mind builds when it looks at an Imperial Titan, one of humanity's greatest war machines, and decides to grow something better, and it did. The Hierophant is a living siege engine equipped with dual biocannons that don't fire shells or plasma. They fire storms of corrosive, maggot-like organisms that splatter across armor plating, eating through plasteel, ferrocrete, and flesh with equal enthusiasm. Every volley is less like a weapon discharge and more like a plague delivery system. Hundreds of writhe writhing parasite dissolving whatever they touch into biological slurry. But the cannons aren't even the scariest part to this thing. Here's where it gets genuinely horrifying. The Hierophant's thick, chitinous armor plates continuously excrete poisonous spores from every crack, every wound, every gap in its carapace. It doesn't need to shoot you. It doesn't need to see you. It doesn't even need to know you're there. Its mere presence on a battlefield poisons the air around it, turning the environment itself into a weapon. Soldiers choke and die in trenches they thought were safe. Fortified positions become gas chambers. The ground it walks over becomes toxic for anything that isn't Tyrannid. And that captures something fundamental about why the Tyrannids are philosophically different from every other faction in Warhammer 40K. The Imperium fights with soldiers. Chaos fights with corruption. The Tyrannids fight with everything. The creatures, the terrain, the atmosphere, the biology of the planet itself. The Hierophant doesn't just attack a world, it transforms the battlefield into an extension of the swarm. But here's what really makes this creature the capstone of everything we've talked about. Every single organism on this list exists in service of what the Hierophant represents. The Genestealers soften the target decades in advance. The Lictors map the defenses. The hormagaunts crash against the front lines in waves. The Zoanthropes shatter psychic resistance. The Mawlocs erupt beneath fortifications. The Swarm Lord coordinates it all, and behind that flood of expendable organisms, the Hierophant advances, a living fortress consuming a planet's capacity to resist until there is nothing left worth consuming. Then it moves to the next world. We started this video with Ripper swarms, the smallest and weakest bioform the Tyrannids produce. Tiny creatures whose only job is to consume whatever's left after everything else is finished. The Hierophant is the reason there's nothing left except biomass for those Rippers to clean up. Beginning to end, from the smallest organisms to the largest, every single piece of the Tyrannid invasion exists for one purpose: total consumption. Not conquest, not domination, consumption. The Hierophant just makes sure the meal is ready. That's not a war machine. That's the end of a world given legs. If you enjoyed this video and want to see more, click the video on the screen now.